Hello and welcome to the Scholar Progenium. This week we've got another exciting bolt action video for you as Warlord Games drop another banger of an intelligence briefing. This time we're looking at the national rules for the armies of Germany. So yes, armies of Germany, something I'm very excited about. The Germans were my first ever bolt action force, and I honestly think you don't play bolt action for very long before you end up picking up a force of Germans for yourself. So I know there's a lot of people out there where even if Germans are not their main faction, they're going to be really excited to see what they have in store when their book arrives in January or thereabouts, it's sometime around there. Now, let's get stuck into the rules without much further ado. So first things first, a couple of things have stayed the same, a couple of things have been slightly adjusted, and we've got some totally new rules as well. So we've got a lot to cover today. Now, first things first, Hitler's Buzzsaw. It's exactly the same as it's always been, a staple rule from the start of version 1 bolt action. Your vehicles get all your machine guns get an extra shot. So your medium machine guns that are ground mounted, just normal machine gun teams, they're on 7 shots, and of course tanks will get 4 shots per medium machine gun, which we're all familiar with. Now, moving on, we've got the Blitzkrieg rule. Now, for some reason in my mind, I always think of this Blitzkrieg rule as the new German faction rule. I feel like it wasn't a part of first edition. I feel like it wasn't a part of second edition at the start, but I could well be mistaken. You'll have to correct me in the comment section. But as far as I'm aware, it kind of just popped up to give the Germans a boost somewhere in second edition. But it's become a staple, and it's going to be really, really effective in version 3, because snap 2s are really useful for keeping the ball rolling, keeping your momentum up, and you've got more units, so just getting through the turn in a reasonable time. And so being able to pull 3 dice instead of 2 for a platoon commander and 5 dice instead of 4 for a company commander. 5 dice is just going to be crazy. I haven't tried it out myself yet in a battle, but I've got to, because that's an eye-watering amount of activations for 1 dice. Doing that first turn could really give your opponent a bloody nose. So seeing those both still featured, fantastic. I'm a big fan, and I think it's going to be giving the Germans a really strong baseline for their national rule. Next up, we have initiative training. Now, this only applies to regular and veteran units, and essentially what it means is that when the NCO is killed, it just doesn't matter. You don't suffer a -1 penalty to morale and order checks. Now, this is an upgrade. Absolutely, for sure, it's an upgrade for a couple of reasons. The first is that you don't have to roll a dice for it anymore. It's not on a 2-up, it's just straight up. You get it. You're unaffected. Some other dude upgrades or someone takes charge. You don't even designate a new model to be the NCO. The squad just runs itself. Now, that's great in itself. That is just a straight up buff. However, it gets more interesting because we've all been in that position many a time where you've got to pick between, let's say, your NCO and your loader for your LMG. So, do you take a -1 to hit, or do you take a -1 to your morale? And it depends on the situation. However, now that decision is just not something that German players need to worry about any longer, because it doesn't matter. Your loader, your LMG gunner, if your NCO dies, those two can just operate as normally. Your NCO, essentially, if he's not got an SMG or any special equipment, assault rifle, so on and so forth, he's just an extra rifleman ablative wound for that LMG. So that's going to be really good with small rifle LMG squads, so on and so forth. And it's just generally more convenient for all involved, although it reduces a little bit of the tactics for the German player because they don't have to make that decision anymore. But it's not reducing the tactics of the game overall because this only applies to German players. An interesting addition to this, I think, is when you consider the LMG situation and not having to remove the loader necessarily. And you combine that with the Hitler's Buzzsaw rule and the fact that Germans are just better overall with MMGs. And I think that makes quite an interesting combination because it essentially means that your LMGs are just going to be shooting at full capacity until your squad's down to the last man, down to the LMG on his own. Up until that point, you're not taking a -1 to morale, and you're not taking a -1 to hit either by taking the loader when you get down to 3 guys. So all in all, it just ties together beautifully, and it makes LMGs in rifle squads, especially now they've had a 5-point decrease, essentially a 25-point discount given to them in 3rd edition compared to 2nd edition because they're 15 points now. That just means that it's worth taking them. I've always said boys before toys. On the other hand, long-time viewers and regular viewers know that I love taking LMGs on my infantry squads for most of my factions. But now for Germans, it's kind of just a no-brainer. Why not take the LMG? It's a cheap increase in range, in fire output, and it's just going to work all the way down to the last man. So although it's only minor, changes, it's a very also minor but certainly significant because it'll come up multiple times a game, every game buff. So something to just think about. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Now that's all the little stuff out of the way, but let's have a look at the juicy meat on the bone of this intelligence report, and that is that Tiger Fear has gone. Tiger Fear's gone, okay? But it's not just been removed, it's been replaced. Now, Tiger Fear, as we know, it was one of those rules that they never quite got it right, if that makes sense. That's not criticism by any means, it's just simply a statement of fact. People would forget it a lot of the time. Now, that's all gone, but personally, I'm not shedding a tear. For me, it just wasn't a rule I was a massive fan of, and I don't think I'm alone in saying that. Panzer Ace now, I am a fan of. And it's very interesting. So I'll read it for you here, word for word, and then we'll have a look kind of at the specific devil in the detail. So although the term tank ace is from contemporary use, many German tank commanders and their feats have attained an almost mythological status, partly through propaganda, but also through sheer skill in battle. A single veteran vehicle in your force, among those that have this option in their vehicle entry, so not every tank can become a Panzer Ace or be commanded by one, so to speak. But when using its main gun, it receives an additional +1 pen modifier on the roll to damage all enemy vehicles, as well as an additional +1 modifier when rolling on the damage tables. This does not apply to coaxial weapons. But the main gun, it doesn't only exclusively affect anti-tank guns. So I'm thinking, if I can take a Panzer II, and I'm painting one up here, it's almost done. If I can take a Panzer II, its main gun is a light autocannon. But if I can make that, now it's cheap because it has to be a veteran unit. Being able to make a Panzer II, which isn't that expensive to make it veteran, it's going to be great because it's ignoring pins that can't affect it, but in many ways it's not going to get as much value out of that because so many more tank weapons can affect it and can put pins on it. Anti-tank rifles are going to put a pin on it anyway. But the thing is that 2 shots hitting on pen +3, that light autocannon becomes a heavy autocannon. if you can get a heavy autocannon on a tank, you can make it a 2-shot light anti-tank gun, which is crazy. So if anyone's aware of any German heavy autocannon tanks, let me know in the comment section down below, because I'll need to be getting myself one of those. So that's very interesting main gun. So it's not just anti-tank weapons. Obviously, having to take it veteran means that it's almost too expensive to take a Tiger Ace. And do you really need it? Pen 8, I mean, whew, that's going to be something. It's going to mean that if you don't roll a 1 on the damage, you're almost always getting 2 rolls with a +1 result on the damage table. So a 3 is knocked out. And because you're pen 8 with such an expensive, high-value tank with a super heavy anti-tank gun, you're not going to hit a tank, pen it, and then be like, oh, I rolled a 1. The minimum you're getting isn't immobilized. You're not just stunning stuff. You're always getting an effective result. And on a 3+, 66% of the time with a give or take, you are going to knock that vehicle out. And with that kind of power, a lot of the time you'll be rolling 2 dice. It's almost a guarantee to one-shot vehicles, most vehicles that you're going to come across. So it's almost too expensive to consider, but when you consider it, that's like meaty. That's really meaty. That, a shout out to Greg over on the Dice Ghost channel, because I know he is going to be cackling at glee when he watches this video. He's going to be rubbing his hands together and just salivating over all the tank kills that he's going to get with his beloved Tigers. Things also get interesting when you consider, now this is just a silly idea, don't get me wrong, but what about the old Sturm Tiger? Now eagle-eyed viewers will be aware that this is actually a Jag Tiger with the barrel removed, but, what are you going to do? Now the Sturm Tiger, it gets a re-roll on its damage rolls because of its mega mortar, the big gun. On top of that, I believe it re-rolls the pin roll as well. I might be getting mixed up. But giving it +1 damage makes it pen 5 with a re-roll. It's essentially a 4-inch template explosion, heavy howitzer, which is taking care of any infantry you need, especially when you get to re-roll the damage roll. So, 1s with 2s with a re-roll against any infantry in the game. But on top of that, pen 5 with +1 on the damage result, and a reroll on that pen 5, that's reliably going to get through and do something to almost any medium tank as long as you can get the hit off. And he's going to be veteran, he's going to be armor 11, so he's going to be really struggling to pin because so many people are going to take anti-tank rifles, heavy machine guns, stuff like that to just slip those pins onto the regular vehicles. But now spamming anti-tank rifles, stuff like that, doesn't seem like such a clever idea, because if you face a veteran player, if you face a German player, there's a much more increased chance that they're going to get a veteran tank, whereas before people were laughing it off like, no one's taken a veteran tank, so why worry? And on top of that, he just won't take those pins. He's so heavily armoured, 11 on the front, 10 on the side, that he'll basically be sitting still, shooting, hitting on 4s, just knocking stuff out with a pen 5 on a reroll with +1 to the damage result. So, again, as I said, it's kind of a silly idea, but at the same time, is it? If you've got a Sturm Tiger, you've got to try it out for sure. I mean, it makes it very, very interesting. Panzer Ace Sturm Tiger. The thing is, we might be getting carried away here, because the Sturm Tiger might not have the option for Panzer Ace, because as we've seen, it says vehicles that have this option, which means I very strongly doubt we're going to be able to rock around the battlefield with our Panzer Ace Verbal Wind popping off 8 Pen +3 shots from like the four light autocannons on that. I mean, if that's possible, that is going to be just super powerful. But I very much doubt that's going to be the case. I think they'll have excluded some units for obvious reasons. But it's very interesting. It's fun to speculate about. Let me know your ideas, your thoughts, your evil and cunning machinations about what you might do with the Panzer Ace rule. What do you think the cutoff point is? Are heavy vehicles just too expensive to justify taking as Panzer Aces? Is a Panzer 3 all you need? Armor 8 with the medium gun upgraded to Pen 6. So you can knock out vehicles super easy, and he's only, 150 points, something like that, for a Panzer 3 Armour 8 with a medium anti-tank gun. I think it's the F, is it? So that's interesting. Is the middle ground the best way? I think light vehicles are going to be the main benefactors of this rule that can take it, but I think it gives you almost a rebate on taking a super heavy tank in your list, like a Tiger 1, Tiger 2, something like that, or a heavy tank, because you only get 1 dice for it. You've got fewer dice in your list because you've spent so much on it, but at least you're not going to get nothing out of hitting a vehicle. And we've all been there where you've taken a heavy tank or something like that. If you've got one, you've hit that opposing tank, and then you've got that blooming 1 on the damage roll. You've got a blooming 1 on the results table, and it's just been stunned, and you thought, curse is not even immobilized. Whereas now, a 1 is immobilized, 2 is set on fire, which is great. You know what I mean? And 3 plus, you're going to knock them out and move on to the next target, which is what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to just use that overwhelming firepower, that might, to just knock out targets, move on, knock out targets, move on. So I think it's a super cool rule. I think it's going to apply really nicely, whatever the chassis that it's applied to. I think making it veteran only is a clever idea, which stops it from being totally abused. And it's going to be really, really fun to explore and find which tanks it works the best on over the next couple of months of playing bolt action with my Germans. So a lot to look forward to with that rule, I think. Now finally we have a very fascinating section of the intelligence briefing, not least because this is going to be rolled out across all of the coming army books in their own individual format. Let's have a look in a bit more detail. Well, certain units in the army book will have an additional special rule called Defend the Fatherland. And it's apparently a load of units. It's not a very rare by any means. They say a huge swathe of units. And what it does is it allows you to field a force comprised entirely of your chosen formation. So if you have a Gerbesjäger army, if you have a Fallschirmjäger army, if you have a Waffen SS army, something like that, you're not just taking 3 units of Waffen SS and then your mortars and your howitzers and your machine gun teams are all modelled like that, but are in fact just not stubborn or fanatical, or anything like that. They're just normal German units with a different colour scheme. Now you can make them have this, or you can pay to have the same rule. So you can have army-wide stubborn on your Fallschirmjägers. Okay, you can take army-wide fanatic on your SS. It's going to be the majority of artillery and infantry units that get access to this, which is really great from a thematic perspective. It's really great for all those people who, love to, because the bolt action community is a very diverse community. You meet all kinds of people in terms of how they like to approach the game. You get some people who, and I mean this respectfully, are rivet counters, and they like absolutely everything to be bang on. You know, some of you out there, you post me these really long, detailed, fascinating comments about units that you're particularly passionate about if I cover them in a video. And that's just amazing. Do you know what I mean? I would love to have that level of knowledge on different units and different formations and so on and so forth. The other side is you've got people who, just play generally, but it lets them get into that. It lets them sort of dip a toe in the water of taking a more thematic force. And that's sort of your just general player, right? Now, this is also going to benefit the gamey competitive people as well. And I'm going to talk about this in a second, but I certainly think that this rule is going to be massively open to abuse, and that competitive armies will be like a total mix. You'll have like some Mountaineer, bazookas, Shrek teams, because you can first turn dash ignoring difficult terrain because you can make them Mountaineers, but then that might be coupled with some stubborn howitzers that are veteran Fallschirmjäger howitzers, so that if they lose 2 dudes from a counter battery fire, they're taking their runaway check on full leadership because they're stubborn. And then you combine that again with like a mortar pit of Waffen SS fanatic mortar. So after someone fights their way through your lines, they get to your mortar pit, you're like, well, charge me if you want with your 4 remaining veterans, but I've got fanatics here, so we're fighting it out until the last man, and you're going to take some casualties, kind of thing. Let's look at the rules in more detail. Unit entry may contain options to take that unit as one of those forces. If a unit is eligible to be taken as that force, its unit entry will say so. It may also enable that unit to take further options not available to the unit ordinarily, so stubborn, stuff like that. Vehicles don't come into this, it's just infantry and artillery. Now, and it only, if they have the defend the option, it's some or all of the 3 options, so not everyone gets everything. Now, if the Fallschirmjäger, very straightforward. It comes with a big buy-in, which is that the unit must be taken as veteran. And they must be upgraded for +1 point per man. Okay? So everyone's stubborn. That's really cool. Stubborn support teams. How, you just don't want your Panzer Shrek team, for example, to take that hit and then run away. Now the problem is that if you take, that is, the price is going to add up rapidly. But I can really see the benefit of taking like a veteran heavy autocannon. A veteran heavy autocannon's like 10 points more than what is a very cheap support weapon as it is a heavy autocannon team. It's got 4 crew, so for an extra 4 points as a tax, because it's 1 point per man, if you get hit by a mortar and you take a couple of pins, you've barely paid a tax and you're basically not running away, which would be great. So I think some support teams will be really good value, but then you're not taking a veteran Flak 88. You're not taking a Flak 88 as it is, it's so expensive, but taking a veteran Flak 88, the cost is just too prohibitive. Then you've got to pay +2 points for 7 crew. It's an extra 14 points on top of that to make it stubborn. It's just not worth it. So it's interesting in that some of the time, if you're trying to be thematic with this, it can really, you don't have to do it, but if you're committed to doing it all the way, then it's going to be a massive tax on thematic forces, really, in many ways. I'm not saying I'm not excited about this, but I'm excited about this from a totally different angle, which I'll get onto in a second. But it's just, that's expensive. It's an expensive buy-in to go full Fallschirmjäger. Waffen SS units must be upgraded to fanatics for +2 points a man. And inexperienced units also have a following rule: mixed quality. Essentially, if they take an order test and they fail that order test, so you give them a fire order and they mess it up because they've been pinned. Now, this is only in experienced units, remember, not reg or vet. You roll a dice. On a 1 or a 2, they go down and they take D3 pins. D3 pins is massive these days, okay? You know, you get shot by a Sherman, you get hit by a medium mortar and you take D2 pins. This is like getting hit by a big shell in terms of the amount of pins that's going to stack on you. So that's a big penalty for sure. 3 to 4, the unit immediately goes down as normal. You get away with it. 5 or 6, now this is mad. The unit immediately makes a run order towards the nearest visible enemy unit or advance if slowed by terrain. If this run of 12 or 6 inches move would bring them into contact with that unit, it counts as an assault into close quarters. If there is no visible enemy unit, you just go down. This is interesting, and it's very interesting playing against Germans. I'm a big fan of, for example, Hitler Youth units with loads of Panzerfausts. I just think they're super cool in terms of thematic unit, and I also think they're really damn effective as well. But if I've got my Hitler Youth unit wedged behind in a ruin or behind a little wall, something like that with my Panzerschrecks, they get shot at because they're a threat. They take a pin. I fail that order check when I'm ready to shoot those Panzerschrecks, and they just hop the wall and run out into the open. Oh my gosh, that's going to be painful. So, I can see this being heavy. Let's put it that way, the mixed quality rule. Next, we have the mountain troops, the Gerbergsjager. Definitely saying that wrong, but I'm sure Dario will laugh at me in the comment section for that. Now, again, units must be taken as veteran, and units must be given fieldcraft for plus 1 point per man. In addition to fieldcraft, they also have the following rule: winter equipment. They basically get skis. They aren't affected by the movement penalties for moving through snow or ice if you're using those optional rules from the big book. You can't take gun shields, but you do get the rule of mountain guns, and you can move through difficult ground in the same manner as infantry. This is very interesting. Let's think about Nebelwerfers for a second. You stick a Nebelwerfer in a ruin and you get hit by a mortar. So they're hitting you on a 2 next time. But, you've got a couple of guys left. Normally, you're getting hit next turn, essentially, unless the dice gods really smile down upon you. You've got one more blast out of your Nebelwerfer, at best, maybe. Now, a mountain Nebelwerfer, if that's available as an option, which probably isn't, but if it is, you take that hit. You advance and move out of the footprint, so you reset the 0 clock, one might say. And you hit on 6s all the time anyway. You don't even care about that order check. You probably got an officer nearby. Roll that dice, fire next turn, you're off, you're happy, you're away, you've saved your support unit. It's also good for, as I mentioned earlier, autocannon positions, howitzers, stuff like that. It just means you can take advantage of that heavy cover. You can get wedged into difficult ground. You can take advantage of it, and you're not stuck there when you finally get hit by counter battery mortar fire, which is going to happen because there's going to be a lot of mortars out there waiting for you, because mortars are cheap and effective, and you can take a lot of them, and artillery is expensive and effective and vulnerable to mortar. Let's look forward to future potential things that we could see in future army books. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about is, does this leave minor factions on the back foot? Minor factions don't necessarily have all these different periods. They don't have whole commandos or paras, stuff like that. So will they just not have this as their options, and therefore they're just left in the dark? Version 2, a lot of them didn't have access to a lot of different units. You didn't have sort of everyone can take trucks, everyone can take normal cars, stuff like that. That wasn't FAQ'd until much later on. So you were just always struggling, if that makes sense. Maybe you didn't have access to a flamethrower or something like that. And then things have got better for minor factions. We can take cars, we can take trucks with machine guns, so on and so forth. And then we straight back to square one. Is that the case? Or is it going to go totally the opposite direction? Will they be expanded? Let's say they give rules that you get for Paris Uprising. Okay, if you're Paris Uprising, then you're fanatic now. Okay, you've got Winter War versus Continuation War in the Finns, and they actually give rules for those two different sort of periods of war, and so on and so forth. So I don't know where it'll go. It's just a question that comes to mind. I've written down a couple of other things. Will we have scary blighter support teams for the Brits? That would be absolutely hilarious. If you're taking a full Gurkha force, you've got your Gurkha mortars. Someone manages to, get into your back lines or something like that, and you can just charge them with a mortar team and halve their attacks and actually kill them off. And they can't charge you. They can't get into your mortar pits. They get some cavalry towards your howitzers, and you're like, right, well, it's half the amount of attacks for your cavalry against my howitzers because I'm a scary blighter Gurkha howitzer, something like that. So that's very interesting because they're going to be doing this for all the army books. Yeah, of course, you're going to have the obvious thing like commando and para machine gun teams. So you've got your stubborn machine gun teams, which is great. Your machine gun team takes a burst of fire from some infantry. They kill a couple of guys. You're not just running away on an unlucky roll, something like that. How will this work for the Soviets and the Japanese, where they don't have, again, these kind of explicit, commandos, paras, these different regiments? Are they going to have, obviously they had many different regiments, will they have expanded naval units, sort of, and that kind of thing? Will we have expanded para brigades for the Japanese? Who knows? Very interesting. Another thing that I've thought about, maybe for the Americans, taking Ranger mortars, okay? Because you could finish your deployment and then your mortar is a Ranger mortar, so it gets a free move. Now, this could work in a variety of ways. They could have placed their mortars in a place where you couldn't quite get your spotter to see them, but if you could just get another 6 inches forward or 12 inches forward, then you would be able to see all their support units that are going to shoot you indirectly. So obviously you can move the mortar or you can move the spotter, but you just do your Ranger dash for the spotter, reposition. They think they're safe, but you got that extra little bit of move into their side of the board. And now you can see everything you need to see. Or perhaps you've put your mortar down and then it's got to the spotter phase and they've got a spotter, and lo and behold, they can actually draw a bead on something you wanted out of line of sight. Well, okay, you're a Ranger mortar, so you just reposition out of the way. And there's loads of stuff like that. How about Ranger bazooka teams? Start off and then just get that free move, dash forward, reposition, and you're behind that wall. You've got that 24-inch range. You can just start popping shots on 4s right away, ready to go. Something like that. Maybe they've got a transport that they thought, he'll never see me from here. But then with your bazooka and that Ranger dash, you can see them and you knock out that transport, slow them down, that kind of thing. Very, very interesting. So there's a lot of just like so much to get excited about in the future. We don't know that much, but there's so much to speculate on, and I'm just really interested to hear what you guys have to say about this. This is kind of just the first thing that comes to mind for me, my initial reaction, you might say. And overall, I'm very happy with the changes. I think the initiative training, it just streamlines the game, and it just makes German rifle squads with LMGs, which are the core of the German army, it just makes them that little bit better all the way down to the line. I think the Panzer Ace rule is super cool, and I can't wait to sort of find out what we can take on it, what we can use it for, and start having some fun with some Panzer Ace Tigers, and also trying to find out what's the most efficient use of it, if it even is efficient. Or one thing we've not considered is, will it never be worth it? I don't think that would be the case, but will it be one of those? It's a national rule that basically puts the Germans in a position where they're one less national rule than everyone else, because no one ever takes Panzer Ace because they don't want the veteran tank, and therefore they miss out on a third of their national rule, so to speak. So I don't think that'll be the case. I can't wait to try it out. The defending the homeland rule, and that's just like Pandora's box. I'm fascinated to see where that goes. I think, as I've said, the stubborn on some support units could be really, really helpful with how often that is the way that they're removed from the tabletop from failing a leadership check. And I think it's just, where do we go from here, so to speak? So I cannot wait to get my hands on these rules. And you guys know, as soon as we've got them, and Warlord have told us we'll be getting them a little bit earlier so we can get some battle reports out for you guys ready for release date. So, and a big shout out to them, and thank you for them as always for their support for the channel. And with that, a big shout out to our members as well. We couldn't do it without you guys. We really appreciate your support. And a thank you to all you guys at home who give us your time to just listen to me waffling away on the internet. So if you like what we do here, you enjoy listening to me waffle away on the internet, then make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps the channel out, and it means that you don't miss out on all of our weekly bolt action content. With all that being said, I hope you found this video interesting and entertaining. This has been the Scholar Progenium. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.